In early 1942, deep inside a drafty hangar in Ohio, a small fighter sat abandoned and uninspired. Its metal skin was dull, its lines unremarkable, and the mood around it was worse. The P-51 Mustang, the so-called new hope of the U.S. Army Air Force, had failed to impress anyone. It was slow to climb, sluggish above 15,000 feet, and seemed outclassed before it even entered combat. Pilots muttered that it wasn't worth the fuel, and one officer sneered, "We'll stick with the Thunderbolts." In a war dominated by legends like the Spitfire and the Mustang looked like an afterthought, a machine built too late and too wrong. But buried beneath the disappointment was something different, potential. Its sleek laminar flow wings were designed to cut drag. Its long fuselage promised range no other fighter could match. The airframe was perfect, the heart was not. The V-1710 engine gasped for air above 15,000 feet, suffocating where real battles were fought. Over Europe, where bombers were shredded by German interceptors at high altitude, that weakness made the Mustang a failure before it could prove itself. Still, war has a way of revealing what others overlook. Across the Atlantic, British engineers at Rolls-Royce studied the plane's shape with quiet fascination. They saw what the Americans did not, a masterpiece waiting for the right soul. To them, the Mustang wasn't dead. It was unfinished. And in a small airfield in England, a decision was made that would change the future of aerial warfare. They would give the Mustang a new heart, their own Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, the same power that roared inside the Spitfire. No one yet knew it, but that single gamble would turn a forgotten prototype into the most feared machine the skis had ever seen. The transformation began quietly, far from the front lines. In the winter of 1942, inside a British hangar, engineers removed the Mustang's weak engine and replaced it with the Rolls-Royce Merlin 61, a powerhouse that had already given the Spitfire its legendary bite. When the mechanics finished bolting the engine into place and the propeller began to spin, no one could have predicted what was about to happen. The first test flight was short but unforgettable. The plane climbed like it never had before, slicing upward through the gray clouds. The pilots were stunned. The Mustang had awakened. Word spread fast across the Atlantic. American test pilots could hardly believe the reports. The once mediocre fighter could now outrun and outclimb nearly everything in the sky. At high altitudes, where bombers were dying by the hundreds, the Merlin-powered Mustang could finally fight. Its top speed soared past 430 miles per hour. It could fly from England to Berlin and back without refueling. It could escort bombers all the way to the target and still have fuel to dogfight on the return. For the first time, the U.S. Army Air Force had a fighter that could go the distance. In the air, the difference was breathtaking. Pilots said it felt like flying a new species of aircraft, steady, powerful, and alive. "It's as if this plane had been waiting for this engine all along," one wrote in disbelief. The British gamble had paid off, and the Americans wasted no time turning it into production. By mid-1943, the P-51 Mustang rolled off assembly lines fitted with built versions of the Merlin, ready for war. The Luftwaffe didn't know it yet, but their skis, once ruled with iron confidence, were about to be invaded by a predator born from both sides of the Atlantic. By late 1943, the air war over Europe had reached a breaking point. Every week, massive formations of American B-17s and B-24s thundered toward German industry, Leipzig, carrying thousands of bombs and even more men. They believed their tight formations and heavy guns would protect them, but the reality was grim. Beyond the range of their escorts, the bombers were defenseless. German fighters attacked in waves, diving in with cannons blazing. A single raid could cost 60 bombers and 600. Pilots began calling it the 25-mission lottery, because few lived long enough to finish a full tour. The Luftwaffe ruled the sky with ruthless precision. Therein swarmed like hornets, cutting through the bombers in daylight raids. Unless something changed, America was on the verge of losing the air war entirely. Then, almost without warning, something did change. The new Mustangs arrived. The first P-51 squadrons took flight over occupied Europe in December 1943. To the German pilots who spotted them, they looked unfamiliar, sleek, long-nosed, and strangely fast. They weren't Thunderbolts or Spitfires, and when they climbed, they didn't slow down. Luftwaffe ace encountered them near Bremen that winter. He dove in for an attack and barely escaped with his life. His wingman didn't. When he returned to base, shaken and pale, he could only say, "They followed us all the way." That phrase spread quickly through German command. They followed the bombers all the way. The unthinkable had happened. The bombers were no longer alone. The P-51 Mustang, born from failure, now roamed the skies with impossible reach. For the first time, the hunters of the Luftwaffe were being hunted themselves. February 1944 marked the moment everything changed. The U.S. 8th Air Force launched its boldest campaign of the war, Operation Argument, better known to the men who flew it as Big Week. The mission was simple but brutal: cripple Germany's aircraft production once and for all. Day after day, waves of American bombers surged toward the Reich's industrial heartland, Augsburg, Leipzig, targets that had once been death sentences. But this time, they didn't fly alone. Escorting them were hundreds of newly deployed P-51 Mustangs, sleek and deadly, their Merlin engines humming with restrained fury. As the formations crossed into German airspace, the Luftwaffe scrambled everything it had: 109s, 190s, even experimental interceptors. But the balance had shifted. Before the German fighters could form up, the Mustangs pounced from above and tore into them with 6.50 caliber guns spitting fire. Pilots later described the sight as chaos: enemy aircraft exploding midair, trails of smoke marking where legends once flew. For years, the Luftwaffe had dictated when and where battles occurred. Now they were reacting, defending, retreating, dying. In that single week, over 600 German aircraft were destroyed, many of them irreplaceable veterans. The Luftwaffe's once fearsome ranks began to thin, replaced by young, untested pilots with barely 50 hours of flight time. American bomber losses, once catastrophic, were cut in half. When the missions ended, one thing was clear: air superiority had shifted forever. The sky that had once belonged to Germany was now dominated by the silver silhouettes of Mustangs. Even seasoned German aces, men who had once mocked the idea of American air power, found themselves outmatched and outnumbered. Big Week wasn't just a victory, it was the breaking of an empire's wings. From that moment on, the Luftwaffe would never again control the skies over Europe. By the summer of 1944, the once invincible Luftwaffe was in full retreat. The German Air Force that had terrorized Europe since 1939 was now fighting a war of survival it could no longer win. Its veteran aces were dead or captured. Its new pilots rushed into combat with barely enough training to land. The sky that had once echoed with the roar of now trembled under the thunder of P-51 Mustangs. The hunter had become the hunted. When Allied troops stormed the beaches of Normandy on D-Day, the Mustang was there, circling high above like a guardian angel. They dove to destroy enemy convoys, strafed trains, shredded fuel depots, and annihilated any German aircraft that dared to rise. For the first time in the war, the Allies owned the air. The invasion fleet below could move without fear, and German resistance on the ground was cut off from above. The Luftwaffe tried to respond, but the Mustangs were waiting, faster, deadlier, and everywhere. By late 1944, the statistics told a story no one could deny. The Mustang could fly over 1,600 miles with drop tanks, outgun nearly any enemy with 6.50 caliber Brownings, and climb faster than the very fighters it replaced. Its kill ratio exceeded 4-1. It wasn't just winning battles, it was erasing the Luftwaffe from the sky. Even Germany's miracle jet, the Me-262, couldn't save them. Mustangs simply waited by the runways and cut them down as they landed. The P-51 Mustang had started as a disappointment and ended as a legend. It turned daylight bombing from suicide into strategy, gave Allied pilots control of Europe's skies, and shattered the Luftwaffe's will to fight. Born in doubt, perfected by courage, and powered by innovation, the Mustang didn't just change the war, it changed the very meaning of air power. The skies of Europe belonged to the Mustang, and the world would never look up at them the same way again. You